Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, and live the life we love. Restorative yoga was really important to me, something I didn't realize at the beginning of my path since I was so much more focused on the active poses in yoga, where the idea of going to the nth degree of human movement possibility, like Cirque du Soleil performers, really gripped me. But as I got older, I realized that the active path has to be balanced by the passive path, and five of the eight limbs of yoga are much more internal. And of course, as one gets older, there's a different pull for introspection and less externalization. All of yoga for me is a face to face encounter with the numinous, a word that kind of implies something magical, mysterious, spiritual, unearthly, but it certainly shatters all your previous ideas of religion or spirituality. Everybody loves the fascinating aspect of the experience, but the sublime aspect, which fillets your ego and makes it such that your insight prevents you from identifying with who you used to think you were. Now you're born again, as they say. So, one of the ways that you know you've entered sacred space is, do you feel like time is regenerating, that you're fresh, it begins again? You've hit the origin, and now you're in touch with the original creative impulse. If you don't feel like you're born again, probably hasn't happened. They call it the come to Jesus moment, don't they? But that's just a metaphor for having an experience that lays bare the truth in a way that you've never seen it so deeply and clearly before. And of course, it does psychological damage to the old order. You can't believe it as freely as you did once before. You're not lost in it. And how to return, that's an important thing. How do you come back having lost all your marbles and integrate yourself in society and your family again? Well, you have to have patience. You have to relax into the idea that there's a whole new way of viewing your life and what you think your life is about, and to persist in the face of challenges, of things that won't go away. Chronic concerns that happen in your life, you can't will it away. You have to learn to make it part of your path. So, they're like a 12-step program. It's a step-by-step process. And a lot of people get hung up in what I call spiritual materialism, uh, using the spiritual techniques to basically build their ego up instead of whittle their ego down. Because maybe you have to do that at the beginning. There's an old phrase that says ego death comes from ego strength, not ego weakness. So maybe you have to build up some of your ego to eventually get rid of it. But when you take the yoga path, there's very little confirmation. At a certain point, if you're going to go beyond even your own teaching, your own teacher and your own lineage, then they call it the path with no railings. Initially, it might be a great smorgasbord, and you dabble in this and you take that, and it's both an infotainment, you learn a lot of stuff, and an entertainment. It keeps you dazzled with all the wonderful things it brings up. But at a certain point, you have to make some decisions that take you off the beaten path and maybe into a direction that you've never been before, and maybe other people have never been before, because your path is unique. And so you have to learn in some way to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and let go of all the different closed-minded categories, labels that people have put on you or you have put on yourself. And then you realize the difference between mountain climbing and pilgrimage. You've heard that there's a top of a mountain. Maybe you see it in the distance. You talk to other people who've made the trek, and then you start to do things like buy equipment to get ready and read all about other people who've made the trek. And then maybe you finally go to the place where there's a base camp, and maybe you find the guide and somebody to take you, and there's different stages. And sometimes maybe the weather is not good, you can't go further than a certain amount and so forth. But it all has that idea of ascending. But when you take a pilgrimage, which you might think that a mountain climbing is a pilgrimage to something, but the pilgrimage is not to outside yourself. It's always to the center within yourself. And so no matter how much you go elsewhere, you end up arriving back where you started, in your heart. You click your heels and you're back in Kansas. So whether you think it's the Southern School, it takes time and you build it point by point over decades or lifetimes if you want to buy into that, or whether it's the gradual school, that's the gradual school, or the Southern School, where all of a sudden, you're doing whatever your preparation is, all of a sudden, ping, it opens in one enlightenment insight, and you're there. So I hope that you all understand that the